Welcome back to Morning Express. It's now 4 minutes after 7 and it's time for us to get into the way it is. I'll go straight into introducing our panel this morning. To my extreme left, we have Senator Omar Hassan, who's the Senator for Mombasa County. Great to have you.
Secretary General.
And Secretary General of Wiper Party as well, SecGen. Yes, absolutely. Next to him, we have Senator Moses Kajwang, who's the Senator for Homa Bay.
Thank you, and good morning.
And good morning to you, and good to have you. We have Honorable Irongo Kang'ata, who is the Member of Parliament for Kiharu.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. And last but not least, we already had him on the newspaper review, Ambrose Weda. Good to have you.
Thank you so much.
And gentlemen, before we even begin, of course, it is first of all celebrating the fact that our team, the Rugby Sevens team, did an absolutely grand job. And just a reminder of that victory dance that they had before I get your comments and compliments. Give you an opportunity to thank our boys for what they did and putting Kenya on the map yet again.
Time to get your Kenyan on, folks. Enjoy. History has been made here in Singapore. We'll see you all again in a few weeks.
The bragging rights, of course, to Kenya now for winning the Singapore Sevens. And let me start with you, Senator Omar Hassan, on your, an opportunity to congratulate the boys.
Shujaa really made us proud yesterday. In fact, I was watching most of it, and then I had to watch the second half at the airport lounge. And everybody, when I was leaving for Mombasa last evening, everybody was for our team. Everybody felt very proud. I think that's what shows when there's commitment and consistency. And then Benjamin Agimba has proven that you don't need a foreign coach. We had Friday before that, and we had the management of Muthee that totally had almost led to a slump of rugby standards. So then the same team came back, and then on the basis of that, we brought back Benjamin Agimba, and he reconstituted his boys, the senior players and junior players that are building in, so that we can almost see a transition in the rugby team. If you're a keen rugby analyst, there was a time when you could not see the transition, but right now young people are coming up, and
it's interesting that all of a sudden, not really all of a sudden, but they're taking a slump.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, they've really taken a slump. There's a time they were doing well again under the coaching of Benjamin. Then when he was off the scene, they took a slump, but now they're back.
They're back, and we hope to keep it there, because I think like cricket is a sad story, because there was a time when we were almost at the highest level of cricketing in the world. Yeah, we were doing Cricket World Cup, and we were getting almost to the semi-finals of the Cricket World Cup. You don't hear about it anymore. So I think we need to have a very deliberate investment in our sports. One thing is, most politicians, because they saw the euphoria in the social media, they started congratulating them for winning the World Cup. You know? I saw that.
Moses, your comments
they say that Kenya won the World Cup. Really, this is not the World Cup of rugby. This was a leg in the series. But it is the first time Kenya is winning a leg in the series. And I think we must congratulate them. In fact, today, I wish the newspapers, that was the only thing that we'd be talking about. I wish today we would...
all the headlines.
We would drop ICC and CORD and Jubilee and just talk about sports and the state of sports in this country. But I also hope with this victory that it will also help to propel rugby beyond the middle class game that it is. Those of us who went to some schools, Lenana, Omar and I, these were schools that played rugby. In fact, rugby had been associated with certain schools. I'm glad that nowadays, if you look at the schools' sports events that happened last week, schools like Lenana and Nairobi School are no longer dominating. In fact, you get schools like Bungoma and Kakamega are the ones that are now dominating.
It's getting down to the grassroots.
So it's getting down to the grassroots. It needs to be a sport that is embraced by many. Finally, also government interference in sports. If you look at what is happening in soccer, sometimes it's because of vested political interest and government interference in that sport that is dwarfing the game. Rugby has been self-regulating to a great extent. We've allowed rugby to thrive with very minimal government interference. I think that is the way to go for sports in this country.
Irongo Kang'ata?
Well, first, I'm very happy with that win. I want to congratulate the winners and also the Kenyans. I think we are very proud of that team. But then again, as my colleague has just said, I don't know. I hope this win is going to make this game to become something for everyone. Because as he says, it is true. It is still remains a game for the upper and the middle class.
Those the people who watch it. It's not a game for everyone in terms of playing. Can you imagine yourself on a rugby pitch?
Because like me, when we were in big high school, the people who used to go and play or even watch rugby, they used to come from those what we call mababi. Those of us who came from the rural area would go for volleyball.
Mababi game.
Would go for volleyball. Would go for football
And choir.
I don't know why it is still something. It's a class game. Whereas, by the way, it's a very exciting game. It's so sweet when you watch it. It's like war. So it makes it very sweet. But I don't know. We need to make it something for
Actually,
the
even now, if you look at majority of those who even knew there was a game going on, it did look like there was a certain, class onto it. But the good thing is that with wins like this, it now also gives us an opportunity to talk about it. Empress Weda, your comments on the
Thank
polls.
you. I think I would like to congratulate these people. They have provided this country with an international billboard where you read, the way you put something KTN as we pass along the road. Now that is what they have done for the country out there. So that it is not, we can brag and say it's not just running, we can do rugby, and hopefully one day we'll do football.
Javelin.
Javelin.
We have done swimming.
Yes, so this is the kind of, even the money we put in, the billions we put in the brand Kenya. You see, they have done it of this. And some of them we channel into this so that they are able to sell Kenya in that positive light. So I think, I hope the big guy, Chris Kerubi, will not just be talking. He will be now saying, you have done this job and we want to continue. But they have done very, very
Absolutely.
well.
Well,
Mike, that's a very valid point. We've read that we spend 3 million shillings a month for positive coverage and lobbying in the US. And what our boys have done is worth much more than that 3 million. So for once, I concur with the weather on something.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is an article in the paper today of how much money we're spending per month on PR in foreign countries. But of course, this would be a good cause for the government to step in. But now let's move on the conversation. And unfortunately, Moses Kajwang will not just talk about sports. I know you'd wanted us to stick on sports, which I can see for once the whole panel is in agreement.
But maybe he should start a rugby team in Sony Sugar. Sony rugby.
He's got the build.
But moving on, of course, we had the two parallel rallies that took place over the weekend. And just to remind ourselves of some of the things that were happening before we come back to the panel and just have a discussion around that. And this is part of what was happening at Afraha and also in Line Saba in Nairobi.
Sisi hiyo chapter tumeifunga. Sisi hakuna pahali pengine tunaenda. Hakuna mtu mwingine sisi tutaruhusu apelekwe pahali popote. Kama kuna sheria, tuko na makoti yetu hapa. Mimi sitaki kuona Mkenya mwingine akitembea ile barabara sisi tumetembea.
Using the constitution and the freedom of information, the president of Kenya can make sure that that envelope is open. And I can tell you, Raila Amolo Odinga is not afraid for that envelope to be opened.
All right, and let me start with you, Honorable Irongo Kang'ata, on the fact that the president now saying that ICC, no other Kenyan will go through the ICC. But of course, there was a question of what about the victims, those who've not been compensated. That seems to have been left out, despite the fact that they had mentioned this would not be a political rally, but the victims really is not a political issue per se.
Well, first and foremost, we all know that this government has been able to do that which Kibaki government and Raida's government did not do in terms of compensating. So many people have been compensated. Those who have been resettled have been resettled. The only outstanding issue is the one of what we call integrated IDPs, because how do you then identify you are an integrated IDP? When we say integrated, we mean an IDP who went to live with a relative. So those are the only outstanding issues. So therefore, the government has done that which ought to have done in terms of the supporting the victims. As to his comment relating to extraditing Kenyans to go and face matters outside in the ICC, I think it's a very good comment. We all know we have a constitution, a very progressive constitution. When you compare the various rights that are granted to an accused person in ICC vis-a-vis those rights which are granted to an accused person here in Kenya, you will see when you take a person to ICC, you limit, you reduce an accused's rights. So there is even a constitutional issue as to whether is it fair to take a Kenyan to a jurisdiction where his rights appears to have been whittled down. So to that extent, I think it is true. I support the president, and his arguments are very valid.
Okay, Senator Moses Kajwang, the CORD had, alluded to the fact that this was just going to be a chest-thumping exercise and more of a political campaign. Would you still maintain the same?
Well, the build-up to the rally indicated that a number of things were going to happen, that the prayer was just a facade for other things, including the relaunch of the campaigns. To be fair to Jubilee, I think they conducted themselves fairly well by restricting the rhetoric and confining themselves to the issue of prayer and ICC. I was in Kibra on the same day, and we went to Kibra also to bring the narrative that victims must also be looked at. But when you talk about victims, we are not only talking about the people who went to camps or the ones who went back to their villages, the ones you're calling integrated IDPs. There are people who died, and no one is talking about indemnifying those households that lost their breadwinners. There are people who lost their property. We know of stories of particularly farmers, especially from Central Province, who settled in Trans Nzoia, who settled in Uasin Gishu, and were very successful in farming. You find someone had maybe 50 acres of land that they used to cultivate. This person was chased out of that land, the house was burnt, the family was killed, and then this person goes to an IDP camp and is given 400,000 shillings. That really is not the kind of justice that we are looking at. What we focused on and what we propose as a way forward, because when you talk about victims also, you owe the nation an explanation of what you think is a way forward. There are two things we said. To avoid the cycles of violence every other 5 years. Since 1992, every other 5 years, we've been having violence. We need to sit down and define the must-dos. And one of the must-dos needs to be electoral reforms to a level where we are getting into the next contest when there is a general feeling that it is going to be fair. But secondly, when Orengo was talking about reopening the Waki envelope, it is not as narrow as many people think. He's talking about getting back to the work that was done post-2008. We set up several commissions. There was Kriegler, there was Waki, there was the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. We need to go back and look at some of the recommendations that came out of these commissions and come up with a proper roadmap to the implementation. Because taking Kenyans to ICC was a measure of desperation. We had defined how we are going to do things locally, set up a special local tribunal to try these people. That is a debate that we need to go back in. It is not enough to say that Kenyans will never kill each other again. You know, that kind of statement you can only make if you are the killer. You must deal with the underlying issues, and that's the message that we took to Kibra.
Okay. Ambrose Sweda, your comments and sentiments on the events that took place over the weekend.
I think the Nakuru rally was basically prayers and thanksgiving. Our Lord says to thank God for everything, and for whatever happened, we thank God for it. Unfortunately, the other side had assumed that it was a chest-thumping rally where they were going to be bashed, especially remembering that for 5 years, Honorable Raila Odinga was the Prime Minister, Kalonzo Musyoka was the Deputy, the Vice President. They were holding very high position, influential position through which they could have addressed the issues they are raising today. So they thought so, and then they went for it, and they were disappointed that these people, it was purely prayers. When the President said no other Kenyan will be taken to those countries, it was not to pull out of ICC in my view. But there are several other Kenyans, Baraza, Okemo, Gishuru, that are being sought all over the world. And having experienced that pain, having been falsely accused, and having seen that they escaped by a whisker, this is the kind of thing, say, what I went through, it's like you go through something, you say, people, my brothers, my sisters, my children will not go through what I have gone through. So it is time that the coalition CORD should also embrace reconciliation, embrace forgiveness. When you bring in people like the ones you have brought, and then you address them in public to drum up emotions, and you don't remember that Orengo was actually the Minister for Lands, and instead of addressing those issues at that time, maybe just went to the saloon to do other things. So we as a country need to embrace reconciliation.
Honorable Moses Wetangula had also mentioned that if Jubilee really was about reconciliation, then what they should have done is called for a prayer session where all and sundry are invited, including the opposition.
Actually, the prayer was, I was here, I remember that I said, everybody is invited. And you could see, they thought that Honorable Ruto and Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta were going to say how successful they are and how strong and how good and how big they are. But when it now turned out that it was purely prayers conducted by religious leaders, and even the speeches were limited to thanksgiving and prayers, these people were shocked because it was too late. They had already, Orengo had already come like a hero because Raila is not there, and with Mudhama, and they had already talked all sorts of things. So even Wetangula, maybe after the rally, he may have regretted that he should have just attended. Remember, they went for the 6. It didn't matter how they feel. Henry Kosgei was the chairman of ODM. But in this one, they said, we are together. Come. Remember, there were 3, CORD 3, Raila side 3, Kibaki side 3, but this one they said come together. Okay. So it is not a question of let us reunite the country.
Senator.
2 things. One, there's a fallacy that the Kenyans are off the hook. The last 3 are not off the hook. Those cases were simply put to a stay on the basis which judges do acknowledge that either evidence was, witnesses were interfered with, witnesses were killed, witnesses retracted their evidence. So the matter can come back at any point once the prosecutor has sufficient evidence to proceed with that matter. So for us to show triumphantly that we were wrongly accused is really neither here nor there from a purely legal standpoint. But from a political standpoint, you can chest thump. As I said, most of the legal issues are not connected to the political issues. Secondly, I'll repeat what I've said in 3 interviews of this nature. Karim Khan is no ordinary lawyer. He's a good mind. He has hacked Bensouda's legal strategy. When you hack Bensouda's legal strategy, if you look at Bensouda a day after the verdict, and they said categorically that they will not be appealing, she came off as a real Western African woman, very outraged and saying that I need the 3 Kenyans. She was doing 2 things. She was trying first and foremost to protect the integrity of the court, and secondly, the 3 Kenyans are her last witnesses to the process, to the progress and probably the success of her cases. Because if they were to be able to get these 3 Kenyans within the jurisdiction of the ICC, they are warrants of arrest for them. And it is wrong for Kang'ata to say we can prosecute them in the local courts here. There is no particularly active investigations or cases before our own jurisdiction. These are witnesses to the ICC Kenyan situation. So once Bensouda is able to get these 3 Kenyans and is able to now make a case to a point where she can demonstrate the witnesses were actually interfered with by these 3 persons, then she can now make a further case that recanted evidence or that those retractions were fraudulent or based on any incentive that was intended to defeat the justice, obstruction of justice. So she can make an application now that those witnesses now be summoned to the ICC. You know, you can now the court can now put a threshold higher and say now instead of simply asking them to come at their own volition, we now summon them. And that easily gives back life to those cases. So for Bensouda, it's not over yet. That's why she said she's not going to appeal, because minus those witnesses, she's unable to proceed. So it will be a futile strategy for her to try and appeal where the facts remain the same and the circumstances remain the same. But on account of that, now she's pursuing a legal strategy that intends to now pursue the line of witnesses so that she can demonstrate first and foremost that there was witness interference. Once she's able to demonstrate that there was witness interference, she can now make a further application to either case 1 or case 2. But this particular 3 people are more particular about case 2, that is the Ruto case, so that they can now be able to proceed on account that the witnesses so interfered with was on account of fraud, and therefore the courts now have the mandate, or she will make a compelling argument that now they need to summon these witnesses. So what Uhuru Kenyatta did over the weekend, the president, was to strike a preemptive strike. Because I think Karim Khan saw this strategy. I also saw it the next day when Bensouda decided now to go for the witnesses. People were like, why? Why is she now going for the witnesses? It looked like she was going for a lower threshold of now just saving face. No, she's trying to get those three Kenyans are her only witnesses to her case. She gets them. She is able to demonstrate that they coached or they interfered and tampered with witnesses. Then she is able to proceed with the case. So I think what Karim Khan must have told them. Now, since the political temperature is high and the mood is high, there's a euphoria. Strike hard and say you'll protect all Kenyans from going to the ICC. Because handing those 3 Kenyans to the ICC is like handing yourself back to the ICC. I can tell you that for free. Because those matters might be concluded in a manner as to demonstrate that there was actual witness interference, and on account of that, to seek further interventions of how to proceed with the case.
Okay, we'll wait and see how that will pan out. Honorable Kang'ata, why did the president have to wait for this time, for a rally like this, to declare that no other Kenyan will be tried, and more importantly, that something will be done for the victims? They've been in power for this long. Why hasn't anything been done?
First, it is not true that nothing has been done in regard to the issues of victims.
Nothing in the sense that we still have 165 families who are yet to see or feel justice.
Well,
and not to mention those who already have died, and you know, their families are still waiting.
Well, compensation is a process. Take, for instance, if you have died and you are a victim. According to the law, you have to take out letters of administration, and taking out letters of administration in the High Court is a lengthy process. Once you obtain those letters of administration, then you have then to file your documents with the relevant government office, and that takes time. And therefore, to a certain extent, you cannot blame the government for failing to compensate such deceased victims. Because, of course, if you fail to follow that process, you may have like 5 or 10 beneficiaries claiming benefits, whereas it's not clear as to who should actually get that benefit on behalf of others. That's number one. Number two, there has been a lot of processes which are being done outside the realm of the public. You don't have to keep on announcing each and every time you give a person something to the public. So much has been done out of the public glare, and therefore the issue is about documentation, which the government can always provide. It has adequately compensated the victims. As to why the president waited up to now probably to have such kind of an event, it is clear. There were 6 accused persons before the ICC. They are being released or even acquitted or even stayed stages. We had the first, 3, then we had Uhuru, then we had the 2. It shows great leadership on the part of the president to hold everything in abeyance in terms of celebrations or even prayers until each and every person has been released. And therefore, the president, once he was released, he wanted to have a prayer rally. But out of his wisdom, he thought it makes sense for him to wait until the 2 are released, and therefore he held a rally on Saturday, which he did. And by the way, to me, it was somehow an anticlimax. Let me say an anticlimax, because even me, I thought when we are going to Afraha Stadium, we are going to blast CORD, we are going to castigate CORD. But once we went there, we started noting that the script was very clear. These purely prayers. No one was blasted. It was about unity. It was about peace. And when you compare the rally at Afraha Stadium with the CORD one, you'll be surprised. These guys of CORD, they were spewing abuses, insults, venom. I was shocked. So indeed,
no, you sounded disappointed that you didn't. That it was not a political.
No. No. Well, you see, one thing, by the way. The president has been teaching us something, by the way, and what has been teaching us, is that we should be humble. We should act with a lot of humility. And I'll give you a good example. We were told when these guys started plotting to whistle down the president, we got that information, and once we got that information before we went to parliament, everyone, of course, the first instinct was, we are going to fight this guy. In fact, like me, I was really preparing myself to go and knock off this guy.
So you're a fighter?
No, surely.
You have a whistle blower next to you.
Surely, how do you go and whistle down a president? It's something that has never happened in this country. Only for us to be called to a Kamukunji and we were given clear instructions. No, don't fight. If these guys whistle, wafanya nini, don't do anything. Again, it reminded me of the event when the president went to Migori. ODM supporters, in their usual violent manner, they started hurling shoes at the president. If you compare the president's reaction and the president's, his father's reaction in 1970s to a similar incident in the same region, you'll see he's a very humble man. He just laughed it off. He does not support fights. He wants peace and love and unity for all people.
That's really misrepresentation.
No. So the point is,
the father, when he went to open
Uhuru. No.
I have to talk about the father.
No. You are going to speak.
People were killed in Kisumu. What are you talking about?
No, you are going to speak.
We know history.
You are going to speak. The point is, I agree. Something bad happened then. No, I didn't say his father was calm. No, in fact,
he held insults.
In fact, I'm saying when you compare
Senator Hassan, let him finish.
Don't let him lie. You should talk like knowing that they are Kenyans who know their history and they have read.
No, my point is, I am not saying that his father acted in a calm way. In fact, I'm contrasting Uhuru's conduct and those events.
His father.
And my point is, the way Uhuru has been portraying himself, it is something, he shows a lot of political maturity, which is a strategy, because now all Kenyans know, if you vote CORD, you are voting for violence, you are voting for chaos, like we experienced in
Kenyans will decide on that.
And whistleblowing, like my brother.
Let me come to Senator Moses, and of course, your comments on what he has to say, especially the fact that CORD, from his description, seems to be a very active in terms of physical activity.
We've never gone physical in any way. First of all, Mheshimiwa talks of Migori. Migori does not only have ODM supporters. WEDA runs a parastatal based in Migori. WEDA has never supported ODM unless he does that at night. The governor is not an ODM governor. What happened in Migori were local political intrigues.
And everybody knows that.
But this,
even WEDA said it when he came here.
Even WEDA
said I was here on this show, and WEDA said it was internal.
It is not an ODM thing. Secondly, the issue of even whistling. I wish you guys had applied a little bit of intelligence to tell the speaker to allow the points of order that we were raising, because the standing orders say when there's a special sitting and the president is addressing the nation, there is an order paper that defines the agenda of the day. The first order was prayer, 2 was communication from the chair, and 3rd was a presidential address. When communication from the chair is issued, members have a right to rise on points of order. No, that was because we had been denied that opportunity to raise points of order. And I wish, instead of just planning to physically confront us, which they are done, you know, he has admitted that they came to fight us, when as we were not coming to fight, and that it's only the president that told him not to fight us. You know, it tells you what Jubilee is capable of. They are the ones who plot to come and fight in parliament, and it takes the restraint of the president to let them go. But let me get back to the ICC, because I think the issue of state of the nation is a horse that we have whipped properly. It would be sad if Kenya withdraws from the ICC. But Kenya cannot withdraw from the ICC because the president has made a speech at Afraha. There is a process of going through that. But secondly, it would be sad if the Kenyan cases go back to the ICC. Because from the onset, especially those people who went there as ODM leaders and accused of instigating the violence at the behest of ODM, we have always felt that they were wrongly taken there. And even on the other side, on the PNU side, they've always insisted that they were wrongly taken there. I don't think ICC was a solution to the problems that we had. And Kenyans know, because this is not too long a history. These are things that happened in 2008. That Waki made recommendations that we set up a special tribunal that was going to handle these cases. If you look at the criminals or the perpetrators of violence in 2008, they fall in different categories. There are those guys in Kisumu who just spontaneously decided to go to the street and to demonstrate, and they were shot down by police. In fact, the people who are shot down by police, according to the Waki report, is close to 500 people. Someone has to bear responsibility for that, for using excessive force on people who are exercising their democratic right. Now, the person who went to Kisumu streets and maybe stoned a building or burnt a government car, should that person be tried using the Western justice approach? In which case, then, we are going to fill ourselves with people who are just expressing their dissent in a legitimate way, but then they were crushed. Now, they are the rapists. They are the people who forcibly circumcised young people in Naivasha. And that has been documented in the Waki report. You are told people were circumcised using broken bottles. You are told women were raped. They were gang raped. There was gender-based violence. The perpetrators of that, really, serious action should be taken against them. There are those who went and bought machetes for groups of youth. But do we use our existing court systems to try all these different categories of people? I think we can be a little bit more creative. Raila Odinga has come up with a proposal which I see not many Kenyans are debating. He's talking about Baraza courts. We can come up with a Kenyan invention. In Uganda, in northern Uganda, when the ICC, when the Lord's Resistance Army matter came up, they came up with an approach called Mato Oput. Mato Oput means drinking the bitter herb, where people, communities that were aggressors could come, sit together. The aggressor would bring a sheep, the victim would bring a goat, they would share that, then they would drink a bitter herb. And then they would say, we have drunk of that bitterness, it shall not come again. But that's a Luo, northern Uganda kind of approach. In Rwanda, they came up with the Gashasha courts, which was quite successful because after the violence in Rwanda, there were more than 100,000 people in prisons. The total prisoner population in Kenya is just about 54,000. So you can imagine if we decided to arrest and jail or everyone who was involved in the post-election violence. This is a time, the narrative we need to be hearing is not those chest thumping and broad statements that we had from Ruto and the president. They now need to tell us that in our view, this is the best way to go about things. My view is that it should not go back to the ICC. If it goes back to the ICC, it will be a confirmation of failure on our part to grow up and manage our own affairs.
All right, Ambrose Sweda, let's talk solutions. What's the solution? There's evidently a lot that needs to be done, and not just statements. Statements we have had. What are the solutions that the government needs to put in place, especially to ensure that the post-election violence victims are taken care of?
I think, number one, we should all agree we want to embrace reconciliation. You cannot compensate people who died because you cannot compensate life. Whatever you get is basically to wipe your tears or to wipe the tears of those who you have left behind.
Families.
Unfortunately, there seems to be the Kibaki Raila government did not have proper documentation. They did not detail some of these things. They played lip service to this very heinous crime that took place, especially to their benefit, the two of them, Raila Odinga and Mike Gitonga. They were the chief beneficiaries. Now, these records need to be there. Now, once they're there, we pursue a reconciliatory approach. Look at those who died at Kiamba Church. Almost 600 of them burned alive. It's fairly painful. That requires psychological solution, people to heal. Even the bitterness that you can see Honorable Moses Kajwang is getting, it is a question of healing. He is also unwell. He is also so bitter that he's unwell. He'd rather take Ruto here, take Uhuru there, and whenever they talk, say, I don't want to listen. We must open up our hearts. But this is possible when we know who. You take, for instance, this man you people are using as a pawn. Is it called somebody Ndege? The one they are undressing in public to seek sympathy. Now, these are the people we reach out for. They speak to Kenyans. They embrace reconciliation. Whatever little is there to compensate them, to wipe their tears, is handed over to them. And then we had the politicians, especially CORD. You saw them dancing in Kibera. They were the ones dancing on the graves of those who had died. There was no prayer at all. There was not even a single Legio Maria sect person just to wave.
Correction, there were prayers, Weda. Just to correct you, there were prayers.
It was the flyways of Modama and Orengo. And so these are the politicians.
I think in all fairness, they began with prayer.
Yeah.
Just ordinary prayers that we normally...
But
ordinary.
You can't quantify and say what is ordinary.
Jubilee prayers are special ones.
And then, you know when you pray, then you go and you saw Honorable Orengo misquoting the Bible. Pharisees, Sadducees, and he should have been told. Jacob himself, Raila, tried to misquote the Bible in Malindi, and God himself dealt with him immediately. So let us, as leaders, embrace reconciliation, where we say something wrong happened in this country, something bad happened, but it is time to heal. We compensate those who have. We pay them money, some of them we talk to, but it is them to release and tell Kenyans, I have forgiven. Luckily, and it is very positive, those who are of the Kikuyu extraction, they bore the brunt of this thing. In fact, it was very difficult. I remember that time. To be a Kikuyu was very difficult. If you were in Kisumu, Kisii, wherever, and you were Kikuyu, it was terrible. But strangely, these people have forgotten. They have moved on. Those who are in the camps, you go to a camp like Mahiu, this one near Naivasha, they have turned those places into towns. Land there is very expensive. They have moved on. You don't hear their leaders talking about Kiamba Church, Kiamba Church, Kiamba Church. So we urge these other leaders also. Healing requires that you forgive. And the only way to forgiveness is actually to forget. If you don't forget, then you don't forgive. Look at what Mandela did in South Africa. He came out after apartheid had done its work. And he came out speaking reconciliation. And people said, wow, is it possible? They established a commission under Desmond Tutu. And 90% of the whole work was about reconciliation and forgiveness. Even Kenya, there will be no cohesion without forgiveness. Leaders, please forgive.
Let me tell you, one of the most important work within the human rights and justice sector is work of memory. You must never forget. We never forget the Holocaust. We never forget our struggle for independence. We are able to probably forgive, but you never, ever, ever forget. Because forgetting means you suffer amnesia and you can do it again. But in terms of always remembering, that's why there is memory work. Everything has been serialized. Everything has been documented. That's why there is the Apartheid Museum. That's why there are memorials. That's why there are the Holocaust museums. Because people must not forget. Number two, I wanted to tell Irungu Kang'ata, my brother here, it's not out of magnanimity that people are restrained. What you could do in 1964 is a pipe dream in 2016, 2015. 50 years later, you cannot go about with your GSU spraying bullets on an entire card of demonstrator. What happens? In 1964, I think we had only the VOK. You could not speak on this, what we are speaking now, particularly the two of us, and walk out here. You could be arrested from the floor of Parliament. Ask members who are arrested as they left Parliament. So the times have shifted, times have changed. We live in a different age. Two.
Why is that your people have not shifted?
Pardon?
Why is it that your people are still throwing stones?
Where?
They need to
This is the ignorance of this is the ignorance. I can tell you, this is the ignorance. This is the ignorance of. Let me tell you.
Let me request something, gentlemen. Can we move away from personal attack and now literally just look at the issues?
You have to restrain him. We're talking such high level, debate. This guy is overgeneralizing, stereotyping, those things of you come out and you're told this community throws stones, this community is a community of thieves. This guy, what are stereotypes? That when you have stereotypes, it means that your education has not helped you.
Number
two.
Moving on.
So as we go forward, in terms of this whole healing, there is no healing without justice. It's a fundamental tool of healing. Number two, this constitution of Kenya does not contemplate forgiveness in terms of those who commit crimes like murder. Otherwise, then everybody should be going to court and saying, sorry about what's happened, let's move on. Crimes like murder must be punished. Yeah, and in South Africa, the one where they like to refer to, I did a lot of work around South Africa. when we were doing our own TRC, or TGRC, every person who demonstrably committed crimes that could be referred to him or her was prosecuted, and some are still serving jail terms. Number 3, you know, this is not an arbitrary process. What you need to do, we had that, what Senator Kajwang referred to, the 4 agenda items. The first one was cessation of violence, the KNDR, Kenya National Dialogue and Reconciliation Process, cessation of violence. The second one was CPEV. Yeah. The third one was Kriegler. And the fourth one, that is electoral process. And then the third one was constitutional, legal, and other institutional reforms. So we have not dealt with the 3. We have ceased violence, but we have not reformed fundamentally the electoral system. We have not dealt with, in terms of accountability for crimes that were committed at that point in time. And thirdly, we are not undertaking any robust institutional, legal, or reforms, in the sense that we have the TGRC process that sets the parameters of our intervention, addressing those, in quotes, what he refers to as anger, some of which is historical of nature. People who are, because some of these things were build-ups. That's why one neighbor turned against neighbor. You live with your neighbor, but he or she is full of stereotypes like Irungu Kang'ata, waiting to do the next thing because of those stereotypes. So you need to now heal the nation in a manner that has a framework and a process. You don't tell us to come to Afraha in a public, like my brother Murkomen saying, ata upinzani ukuje. There are systematic ways of how to hold joint prayers. When Uhuru Kenyatta, President Kenyatta, needed Raila Odinga to attend the memorial of the El-Ed soldiers who were killed, they were all there.
Let me pause you a little bit, because it's easy to throw or cast stones to the other side and say they should not do this, but it's bringing post-election violent victims on the stage and displaying them, helping this country.
They're giving testimonies. They were not being displayed.
It is a testimony.
They were giving testimonies, much in the same way. On the other side,
but
there were 2 types of victims. The victims who said they were satisfied that the matter has been brought to a closure. We saw them in Afraha. Yeah. And you saw victims on this other side who have been neglected. So we were saying that there must also be equality in the treatment of victims. There are victims who systematically, if the government was sincere about following up the matters of victims in a conclusive way, this documentation does exist. So various organizations have them. You go to the city mortuaries, you go to human rights organizations, you go to quite a wide array of institutions have documented these instances of victims. So I think it's a matter of how to have a comprehensive approach rather than have this piecemeal approach about going, for little prayer rallies here and there.
Okay, Honorable Kang'ata, would you like to respond to that? You were interrupting, so maybe I'll give you a chance now to respond.
Well, in my own opinion, I agree that we need to have mature politics, and I agree that leaders, of course, they need to work in a more civilized manner. But then again, that applies to each and every political player, whether you're in CORD, whether in opposition. My point was, when you look at the way the oppositionists have been conducting themselves in public, it leaves a lot to be decided, including, by the way, even during their own internal democratic processes. You remember there was that ODM elections here in Kasarani. You saw people fighting. I have never seen such occur probably in our party. And by the way, when you look at
it in Nakuru County Assembly, it is predominantly Jubilee.
When
what are you talking about?
Well, again, when you look at the nominations, by the way, we are heading to an election. We all know the party which has a more reputation of violence when it comes to nominations. So my point is, everyone should act in a sober manner, whether in opposition or in government. And the president is setting a very good example of how leadership should be in terms of how you deal with your enemies, that he is training us to be humble and not to fight with all our force, which I would urge my brethren here to embrace. Is a very good ethical standard. But then again, I don't know why they seem they don't want to listen to anything the president says. When you tell them to be humble, no, they become violent. I don't know, it's bad. Again, we must also look at the wider implication of the statement that was being said by the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Raila Odinga. He gave some statements this week which appear to say that he is not very supportive of that acquittal of our 2 principals, which to me, it appears then to betray his stand on the ICC. He supports the idea of arraigning Kenyans before the International Criminal Court, which to me is not good. Probably we need to reform ICC before we can 100% embrace that process. I agree to a certain extent that indeed we need to have a mechanism that checks our leaders, and we are yet to reach a situation where sufficiently our own systems are good, but still there is a lot of reforms that ought to be done in the International Criminal Court's justice system. And that has not been done. And therefore, when Raila Odinga appears to support such kind of a system, then he lends credence to that allegation. He may have been somehow behind the arraignment before the ICC.
Okay, Honorable Kajwang, your comments on Raila's statements on France 24 as he was being interviewed, which of course the president came out very vocal and seemingly annoyed at what the opposition leader had to say.
Thanks, Mike. First of all, this issue of Irungu Kang'ata painting ODM or opposition with a brush as violent. All the suspects in the post-election violence cases, most of the 6 who went to the ICC and were let off the hook, not because they were innocent, but because witnesses had been murdered, are all now in Jubilee. Even Kosgei has joined Jubilee. Even Sang wants to run for a position in Jubilee. So don't use a brush to paint opposition when all the people who the world has looked at as suspects are in Jubilee.
He's not painting opposition. He's actually trying to refer to the people of the lake.
Yes,
have you reminded this guy
and whether is also, even whether is in Jubilee. But what Raila Odinga said, and I support it, and he is back in the country, and as one of his members, I should tell him that he should not even have any apologies over what he has said. What did Raila Odinga say? That the dismissal or the vacation of the cases, because I think the right word here is vacation. The vacation of the cases was based on interference of witnesses. Interference, political interference in the process. The death and disappearance of witnesses. As ODM, because these guys were there, taken as former ODM members, we would have loved Ruto's case to be dropped on the basis that he was found not culpable, he was found not complicit in the chaos that we saw in this country. But if the matter is vacated because witnesses have been interfered with and some witnesses have been killed, and Omar Hassan has explained it very clearly that this is not the end of the ICC cases. It is that basis that Raila Odinga was saying sends the wrong message to the world. Because next time, Mike, if you find yourself with a lot of money and you are taken to a justice system, you can do the same thing that seems to have happened in these cases. But in terms of solutions, because I really wish that instead of just saying we pray, because prayer is a good intervention, but it is not the ultimate solution. These guys of Jubilee have been saying that Raila Odinga has done nothing ever since the violence that broke out. And we forget that the efforts and the attempt to set up a local tribunal were driven single-handedly by Raila Odinga. It got to a point when even Mwai Kibaki was not supportive of it. All the efforts to establish a local tribunal, who messed it up? It was the brigade led by Isaac Ruto then, who was strongly supporting William Ruto, who said, don't be vague, let's go to the Hague. So during his time as Prime Minister, he presided over very significant institutional and constitutional changes that have brought us to where we are. There could have been violence in the last election, were it not for the work that the Grand Coalition government did. As we go to the 2017 elections, we are seeing a reversal of some of the things that were put in place. For example, the Electoral Commission, when we are going into the last election, there was a feeling that the Electoral Commission would be a fair arbiter. But as we stand today, we've got a situation where the churches, NCCK, in fact, even if I don't talk about the political class, NCCK talked about the IBC, that it has lost public confidence. The Catholic bishops, 2 weeks ago, they came up with a press statement saying that the IBC is not fair and cannot lead us into the next elections. It is not only politicians who are talking about it. Even Jubilee, Kanu is in Jubilee. Kanu has said with IBC we are going to get into chaos. We should not walk into a hole that we are seeing. And these are the solutions that we need to be focusing on, not people telling us to close our eyes and forget. Reconciliation can only happen where there is a feeling that justice has occurred, not because you have been told close your eyes and pray.
Okay, I can see Weda shaking his head in disagreement. Whether what is it that you disagree with?
The late Christopher Malwa Kijana had issues with Honorable Raila Odinga. They would agree on one thing, and when they reach the other one, Raila does the very opposite. So he said this, and I saw it, it played out. He said sometimes you talk to Raila, and you fail to talk to Amolo, and also with Odinga. So when Raila speaks, you think Amolo is speaking. When Raila, the politician, was speaking in Kenya, he congratulated Mheshimiwa Ruto. When Amolo was speaking in France, is it France or Italy? Now the Amolo himself, the man, he wanted these people to continue. Maybe when Odinga, the spirit, comes back to Kenya, it will be a third thing. It is a sad and unfortunate thing. Just see the kind of divide it has created, showing, oh, we wanted some people to be jailed. It is like some people were sent there. It is very, very, very wrong in terms of the reconciliation we want. Actually, Raila has a wide constituency, and it should provide leadership, positive leadership that leads to reconciliation.
Isn't that leadership to declare and say what he feels the nation should have? Because at the end of the day, justice for the victim still remains undone.
Yes, but you see,
not to say that those individuals should have been jailed, but it's just saying that, does that mean nobody did anything?
You see, earlier on he himself had declared their innocence. Earlier on, then he later on said they belong in jail. Now the case is out, he says, actually, we feel very bad, they should be in. The damage it does to the country as a leader of his caliber is where, you know what it means? Actually, the Luos really wanted, the Luos like him and I don't know me, they wanted Ruto jailed. It does not aid the reconciliation process. As these people say, at least our God says, you leave revenge to the Lord. So you forget certain things. That's why we are saying, be like children. You hurt a child, after a while he's forgotten, you move on. But if you keep on remembering some of the things he's talking about were done before he was born, because I was not born yet and I'm older than him.
I think the reason we remember those things is because there is memorialization. It's called you restore that memory.
Probably what Weda means is letting go rather than
you
forgetting.
Let go.
Forgetting is not.
Maybe. When you let go, then it cannot be that every time something happens, you know, I forgive you. Oh, this one, you let go and you forget about it and you move on. What really happened like in Kiamba? The only way you heal from it is to forget. If you keep on remembering, I remember the way my cousin was roasting. You will never heal.
Let me tell
Senator,
you, what
Raila
Odinga talked about was simply a context, analytical context. And he reiterated simply what the judges said. That this case collapsed because witnesses were tampered with, and there was constant intimidation from local politicians, the African Union, and stuff of that nature. But the ICC, the court they regard as unfair, when they realized that the threshold of evidence was not sufficient for them to proceed, they said, we are not going to proceed. So they come back home to celebrate the same verdict of a court they do not recognize. So I think on account of the whole undercurrents towards the ICC, I think it is important to restate the fact that we must fight impunity, and impunity must be fought at the highest level of impunity.
Did he have to wait to go to France to say that?
He was in a radio interview. A TV interview. So when you are in a TV interview, you ask so many questions, and that's where sometimes you can. I've been to interviews of this nature, and the next in the evening, whatever I have said, part of it constitutes part of the news bulletin. So you can say something, and then it is that matter in a long series of thing or context that you're trying to respond to, formulates part of the what is newsworthy in the view of media practitioners like yourselves.
Okay, Honorable Kang'ata, conclusion in terms of going forward.
Well, going forward is that we as Jubilee, we shall continue doing good, being humble to Kenyans, and we hope our colleagues are going to emulate us, except probably they seem to be drifting apart. I don't know how to say all that drifting apart, because I would have...
No, it's not about MOUs.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just concluding by saying they seem to be gravitating apart. I don't know. Maybe shall have
Honorable Moses.
Yeah, you know, that's the attitude of Jubilee, that they continue doing good, they continue stealing money from NYS, Eurobond, and all sorts of things.
And you generalizing the same way you say that they should not generalize.
That's a good.
Maybe it is
there is evidence. 791 million. There's evidence. There's evidence on the youth fund. There's so much evidence. I'm seeing the deputy president is looking for land in Nyandarua. That's a subject for another day, to build another hotel. Give us solutions. You're the government in power. You've got a social contract with Kenyans, and you do not have to. I know there are not too many rocket scientists in Jubilee. Go back to the curricular report, to the Waki report, to the TGRC report, and if you fail to synthesize the contents of this report, one of the most patriotic things Raila Odinga ever did was, after the Supreme Court ruling, he wrote an open letter to the President of Kenya and said, "My brother, I offer you a hand of peace, an olive branch, so that we may live in liberty and peace and all that." And Akina Irungu Kang'ata dismissed us, that we are seeking attention. We called for national dialogue to discuss some of these things that we are talking about. They dismissed us. We attempted to amend the constitution through a referendum. They went and connived with the IBC. What we need is seriousness. If you guys cannot come up with something serious, we can help you define the must-dos that we must deal with before we get into the next election.
We can give you
all right, I think we'll have to wind it up right there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have Senator Omar Hassan, Senator Mombasa County. We have Senator Moses Kajwang, Senator Homa Bay, Honorable Irungu Kang'ata, Member of Parliament for Kiharo, and last but not least, Ambrose Weda. And just to read some of the comments that are coming through, we have Nyakogelo, who says that please spare us from the excruciatingly simplistic reasoning by Ambrose Weda and Kang'ata. The debate is well organized, but Honorable Kang'ata is really interrupting. He's a whistleblower in this case. So Honorable Kang'ata seems to be more violent than Sam Makwele says that Morning Express, I agree, it's important to explore how to do a Kenya version of Gashaga courts. Then finally we have more, but I'll just read one more where we have Luceno, who said, why didn't the president ask the displaced to go back to their land? Well, thank you very much for participating. That's the way it is, and we'll wind up the way it is right there. But Morning Express is still going on. Do stay with us. We've got some news bulletin coming up. Then after that, we've got Sports Chat with Robin Toskin. So that's all lined up for you. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express.